Good evening. My name is Nabil Awad with ATV. We welcome Dr. Christine Alessandro this evening, and she has her doctorate degree in clinical psychology with an emphasis in families and children from California Institute of San Francisco. She is a parent and child development coach and consultant. She also worked as a mental health consultant for nonprofit organization. She is here today to talk to us about how to live a healthier and more fulfilling life. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Yes, it's great to have you with us today. Please tell us more about how you come to the U.S., where you are originally from, and where were you born, and think a little bit more about your personal life.
I'm half Palestinian, half Greek, and I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I came to the United States at the age of 18, and I had to learn how to adapt and acculturate to a very different culture. I finished my last year of high school here, which was very difficult. I had left all my friends behind. It was a very important year for me. So it was a difficult time. And then I just stayed and continued my college years here. I came to America because we had a civil war, and we came here due to being evacuated.
Oh.
So it was a very dramatic way of leaving our home and escaping so that we can be safe. So I stayed for college, and I always knew that I wanted to study psychology. I was very interested in people, in how the human mind works, and I always loved being with children. So I took a focus in working with families and children, and that's what I've been doing for the last 16 years.
And how do you come about becoming a doctor, and how long have you been doing it?
It takes a very long time. It took me 10 years to get my doctorate degree. It's a lot of dedication
Yes,
and time, but I did it, and I enjoyed the process. I learned a lot. I grew from it too. When you're studying about the mind and behaviors, you learn about yourself along the way.
I'm sure.
And you begin to understand your own family dynamics. And I finally graduated, and in 2006, so I've been working since then, but also before then, because when you're doing your doctorate, you're actually working while you're studying.
Oh, I see.
And I also did my thesis on Arab American women and their attitudes towards psychology at the time. And I studied the attitudes of women living in the Bay Area from Middle Eastern descent. And it was an interesting finding, because I was able to find out that most Arab American women are open to receiving psychotherapy. But they prefer going to family and friends or people in their church or mosque before seeking the help.
Yes.
But it was a very interesting finding, because we always think with the stigma in our culture
Yes.
that we wouldn't want to seek the help.
Yes.
But my study showed that there was a positive response towards getting the help.
Yeah, I can agree to that, because where I grew up, I'm not familiar with the idea of going to a psychologist, and most people basically end up hanging out with family or friends and basically venting and telling them about their personal or work problems.
Yeah.
So yeah, after being in the U.S. for quite a while now, learned that people sometimes end up going to a psychologist that will help them to actually develop a relationship with their doctor that will help them to get out of if they are into a depression or some other issues that happen in
Yes.
their life.
Yes.
Would you mind telling us you already mentioned that you deal with people from Middle Eastern descent. What triggered you into choosing people, and since you deal with kids, what made you choose dealing with children instead of adults in that field?
One of the reasons is I love children and I connect very well with kids. The second reason is I find that when you work with children, you can prevent what happens when you see them when they're an adult.
Makes sense.
And you can do more work and you can touch them in deeper ways and faster, so that they can lead better lives as young adults and then into adulthood. So I found that more interesting, because I worked with children in my internships and with adults. I started seeing that I had more of an interest in the younger population.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you also deal with kids who are from the US, or only kids from the Middle East, or at least from?
I work with children from all cultures and all backgrounds. I work with people who are immigrants and people who are native. And I work with issues that range from ages 0 to 18. And the issues vary. It could be family dynamics, family issues where there's conflict, divorce, and it could go to extreme of a serious mental illness like bipolar, schizophrenia. I work with all those issues, and it affects the family. So when a child is dealing with an issue, whether it's emotional or behavioral, it's not the child only, it's the whole family. And that's why family therapy is very important, because you're working with the family dynamic and you're helping everyone in the family, not just the person who's struggling.
Oh, I see. So you actually deal with the entire family, so the parents and sometimes siblings?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes when we do family therapy, we work with the child alone, and we can work in conjunction with the family too. And sometimes I even work with the parents as a couple, because the stress of what's happening in the family affects the parents. And sometimes those issues can't be talked about in front of the children.
Oh, I see.
So I do a lot of work with the parents alone. Sometimes it's also a single parent raising a family, so I work with the mother or the father alone and support them through it. So the family is very important, and every person is important in that dynamic.
Oh, I'm sure. Did you ever have a case that you had to work with several children from the same family, or do you usually only work with one child?
Usually what happens is one child comes in where the parents are like, we have a problem with this particular child, we're having challenges, can you help us? And then they'll say, well, we have issues with the other child. Usually the best way is, if it's going to be individual therapy work, it's best that that child be seen by another therapist. That way they get their own time, and it's not blended in with what's happening with the family as a whole. It's best that way. That's usually how most therapists work. That way the person doing the family work can focus on the family, and there's no conflict in the relationship with the therapist and the child that's being seen by someone else. They can get their time alone without it being mixed in with what's happening with the family.
Oh, I see. So you basically work with one child, and sometimes you have the parents get involved because of the relationship between the two,
Yes.
the parents and the child.
Exactly.
Oh,
yes.
interesting. So you also work with a non-profit organization, services in the community to serve at risk youth. Can you tell us more
That's
about
right.
that?
Yeah. So I consult with nonprofit organizations that are social service organizations. They have programs that support kids that are at risk in the community. And what I do is I come in and I assess where they have challenges, and they tell me, it's a collaborative effort where they tell me, we have issues with this and we have issues with that, can you help us? And what I do is I come in and I survey the staff and I survey the leadership team, and then I let them know where I see the gaps, where I see their challenges. And then we talk about how we can move forward. So sometimes the challenge is that they don't have enough training for their staff. And so I offer the trainings to their staff. Sometimes they may have issues with the structure of how they run their programs, and they need me to support building that structure for them, making it better so that the support for the kids gets stronger, the kids that they serve. So I support them with structure. Sometimes it's teaching them how to run a meeting, how to facilitate a group. It varies. It's a very, very fluid type of consultation where anything can come up. There's a lot of variety.
Yeah, I see.
And I support them, and I work with them between 6 months to a year. So I offer them an assessment, then I provide them with ideas of what they think is feasible to do in terms of change, and then I begin to implement those particular things that we've agreed upon. And it takes time. It takes 6 months to a year for that change to happen, for the work to be done.
I see. So you said between 6 months to 1 year. So is there like a time limit that you give yourself to how long you can spend with that specific child?
So with the consultation, I'm working with an organization. So I'm working with a group of people. I'm working with a whole program. Sometimes it's 20 people, sometimes it's 30 people, sometimes if the organization is small, maybe it's 10 of them. So I'm working with the group, and I'm dealing with changes and training them and supporting them. So it takes time because it's big change. We're talking about organizational change.
Wow.
It's an implementing changes in the organization itself, not just in the person.
Yes, yes, cool. And you are a parent yourself. How is that related? How do you try to use that your professional experience into your family development, and how you raise your child and that sort of things?
Yeah. So, when you know a lot of things as a psychologist, when you're a parent, it's very different because you are more emotional.
Yes, of course.
You have that relationship with your child, and they trigger you in many ways. So, I'm definitely not perfect. I do have the skills and more of the knowledge to be able to understand why I may be reacting or why my child is being a certain way, and I may have some tools that I can implement. It makes it a little easier that way, but it doesn't change the fact that I do have an emotional reaction like any other parent, and I have my moments too. But what it does help me is when I work with families, having a child of my own does bring another level of my ability to empathize with the families and what struggles they go through.
Oh, that's cool. So what are some of the steps to a mental well-being that you can give us today?
So when working with families, it's important that you take note of your children. Be aware of what's going on with your child. Take time to be with them. I always tell families, it's not quantity, it's quality. Sometimes parents want to do so much for their kids and they're stretching themselves thin, but they're anxious and they're nervous and they start yelling at their child. But if they realize that it can just be 10 minutes of just quiet and calm and doing something fun together, that's plenty. That's more than that time where you're stretching and screaming and yelling and being frustrated. And just taking the time to communicate, having an open channel with your children, finding out how they feel or what happened in their day. You can do it over dinner time. When it's a teenager, you can do it in the car. You have them in the car, driving them to school and from activities. And if it's a younger child who's 5 or 4 or 3 or 6, you can do it during their bath time or during bedtime when you're reading them a story. You can have some time to talk to them. But it's very important to have an open communication, and you want to lead up to that throughout the teenage years because things get difficult. That's when your children don't want to be around you anymore and they don't want to tell you what they're doing. And they go through their own identity crisis and they're finding their way, their own independence. So that's very important. Those are a few main things to keep in mind as a parent, and to always make your child feel like they are loved and they're connected to the family. Because as they get older, they tend to go away and they start getting pulled in by peer pressure.
Yes.
And they start feeling disconnected in some way. So it's very important to keep them connected with something that you do consistently as a family. Whether it's dinner time every night, whether it's every weekend you do something together for an hour, whether every few weeks you go on a trip together. Something small, but something meaningful, that you have a connection with your child through something that you do as a family. That's very important too.
So you work with kids all the way until they are teenagers, you know.
Yeah.
What do you actually tell the kids, you know, when they are like basically they are done or about to be done working with you? Is there anything that you give them that will help them to build structure on how to fulfill the gap that they, or the void they will have after leaving, you know, the service with you, you know?
You know, usually I work from a very strength-based approach, so I always tell the family that they are an expert in their family. I'm not the expert. They know their family best. I'm just here to guide them. I'm like a compass. And they know, and I'm going to show them a bit of the way, but they already know the way. They may have gotten lost along the way. And I always use their strengths, because every family, even though they're going through difficult times or very low points, they have something positive happening there, but they just don't see it. So my job is to find that, pull it out, remind them of that, and use it to help leverage them up back to a place where they feel they can breathe again. They feel they can manage and be whole in their own way and at peace. And so when we are towards the end of our journey together, I remind them, you have what it takes, you've shown yourself that you can do it, and I remind them of the strengths that they have as a family and individually. And most of the time people are ready to move forward. You know, they know that they're ready. And if they ever need to come back for a touch-up, they call back for that. But really, most of the time people know when they're ready, and I just remind them of all the good things that they have in them.
Yes. And what made you choose the Bay Area as your, place of, residence and place of work? Is there any special thing that made you choose California in general?
So when we moved to the United States and we had to leave the Democratic Republic of Congo, we came to California because my mother's brother lived here. Mm-hmm. We came because there was family. And so again, the theme of family comes again. That shows how important it is to have a community. And he was kind enough to help us and support us through our time here. And then we found our own way and we stayed. And I love the Bay Area. It's very diverse.
It is.
And I feel like it's my home now. And I've made it my home. And I live in San Francisco. I've lived in the Bay Area on the peninsula for many years. And I have a network of friends and colleagues, and I've decided to have my practice in the peninsula mm-hmm. and in San Francisco, so I can offer my services in both places. There is a big need. A lot of families struggle in the Bay Area. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure, and my services are sought out very often.
Oh, I bet so. I assume you stay busy all week, dealing with family and kids, from all parts of
I do.
life.
I work with families in different ways. I don't only offer my services in an office, but I go to people's homes. I go to families' homes and I help them in their home environment. Families don't have the time to come to an office. Children come out of school. When you work with families, you have to work in the late afternoons and in the early evenings.
Yes.
And they don't have the time to come. And the traffic, as you know, in the Bay Area has become very congested. So my going to their home makes it easier, but I also get to see how they work and interact in the natural environment in which they get triggered. Wow. And so I'm able to support them in the moment. So if something's happening when I'm there, I support the family and I show them how it's done. I show them the healthier way to deal with conflict or to manage a difficult situation with their child.
Wow. So you try to get involved with them in their family day-to-day
Yes,
life,
yes.
you know, and see how you can implement a schedule or a way to deal with the situation they are in at
Exactly,
the time, you know.
exactly. And families really like it. They tend to, in the beginning, they're like, oh, you come to the house, because most people don't understand, that can happen. They think you go into an office, but it's actually, once they realize what it is, they really appreciate it, and they really find that it's very helpful and useful to them.
Yes.
And then I have other people I work with, and I do video conferencing because they don't have time at all.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, it's easier to do it over, Skype.
Yes.
And those are with families that have milder issues in which I may not need to be there in person all the time, and I do maintenance with them.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many ways people can get the help that they need. It doesn't have to be such a big commitment, and it doesn't have to be time consuming. And sometimes the little that they do, even a phone call for getting some support, can really go a long way for a person who's going through a very difficult time.
So given the fact that you work with a nonprofit, have you ever had to deal with a family or kids, or your services were requested to deal with people who are overseas prior to them coming to the US, who are maybe potentially happen to, let's say, get their visas or immigration to come to the US, and they already know that their kids have issues or the family have an issue with the child?
Yes. I've worked with a lot of families, immigrants from, South America, Mexico, Middle East. I've worked with a lot of different families, and they struggle. They struggle when they come here. Some of them struggle because, first of all, they don't know the language, they don't know the system, they have to adapt to a different culture, a different way of thinking. It's a big blow for a lot of families. That's one piece. The other piece is some of these families are coming from places where they've escaped a war, or they've experienced severe trauma, maybe even family trauma like domestic violence.
Yes.
And abuse. And so they're escaping that situation to come here and seeking asylum. And so we're dealing with many layers of trauma, and trying for them to learn how to live in a culture that they're not familiar with. So, and trying to find jobs and trying to put their kids in a school. We're talking about many layers of challenges that they're facing. And the stigma, the biggest piece too for a lot of these families is a stigma around getting therapy. They
Yes.
come from cultures where if you seek that kind of help, you're considered crazy. And so we're
yes.
dealing with trying to combat that while we're supporting them. And yet they become very grateful because they recognize that it's not what they thought it was. The support they're getting from a therapist it's helpful, it's useful, we're the ones helping them move along and connecting them to other community resources that they need in order to, make it work for them in this country.
Yeah, and they're not crazy. They're not considered crazy,
Exactly.
to seek help from a psychologist,
Yeah.
Any last advice that you can give our audience to how deal with family problems and with kids,
Yeah, I mean, my advice is if you find yourself in a difficult situation with your family or within yourself as a parent, or if you're a teenager, you're not alone, number one. You're not alone. There are people out there who are suffering too, and there is help. Seek out help, find a friend, find someone you trust, and make that call, and you'll see that it will bring you a lot of relief. I think that's very important, especially in our community, in our culture. People don't tend to do that, and I strongly encourage that people make the time and put a priority in themselves, because you come first, and if your state of mind is not the way you want it to be, and you're not feeling well, you can't be the best person that you want to be. You can't put your best self out there. So invest in yourself, invest in your well-being, and you'll find that everything will get easier for you.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you only deal with kids that speak English, or you deal with people who have that speak different languages?
I
beside
deal with
English?
people who speak the languages that I speak. So I speak French, Arabic, and Greek, and English, of course. And so I serve families who can speak those languages. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
since you deal with people who have a stressful life or have issues with their family, I mean, especially their kids, what do you do to when you get stressed for yourself? You know, what put you at ease? What takes your mind away from those things? You know, to make you relax and let's say that you have to deal with another family that have an issue the next day.
Yeah. Well, through the years, I've learned to, to make the time for myself, to have the healthy boundaries that one needs when they're doing this kind of work. And I have some relaxation techniques that I do even when I'm driving in my car to go from one appointment to the other. Sometimes it's breathing and doing a little meditation. Sometimes it's listening to music. Sometimes it's calling a friend and just venting and letting it out and just distracting myself. But I like to, I have my own rituals that I do between my sessions that help me relax and move on and clear my mind so that I can be fully present for the next family.
Well, Christine, well, it's very nice to have you today. We thank you for being with us today, and we hope to see you in the near future.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
again.
I appreciate being here.